Well, folks, today is the day that I am saying goodbye to this 10-gallon rack. This is kind of a bittersweet moment, but at the same time, it's time to move on to bigger and better things. And it's also one step closer to my 220-gallon that's sitting in the other room. So this is part of the reason why I haven't moved my 220 in is because I have this 10-gallon rack that I've built myself and put together. If you guys haven't seen it, I'll put a card up in the top right corner for you guys to check out if you want to see an explanation of how I did it. So in a way, it's nice to see this go so I can move this new tank in here, but at the same time, I'm sad to see it go just because of the fact that I built this myself. I put this all together with the PVC air lines that's going to each tank and set this all up. So it was a big project, but time to move on. And I'm looking forward to the progression of the 220 as we move along. But long story short, a guy named Craig off of Facebook Marketplace I got to know really well, and we actually went to like auctions together, and we've seen both each other's fish rooms and got to know each other a little bit. So he's the one that's actually going to be taking this from me, and I hope nothing but the best for him. And we'll get one last look at this before we start tearing it down.
Now, if you remember from previous videos, you've probably already seen a majority of this anyways, but there's only a few fish in each tank, but I was really happy about how this turned out. I actually built this 20-gallon long setup first before I made the 10-gallon. There's a very detailed explanation of how I made this one, and I'll put that up in the corner as well. But I put only a select few fish in these tanks, long story short, in preparation for whenever I was ready to sell this set, that I wouldn't have a whole lot to move around. But this is kind of one final look of how everything is currently. I'm going to be moving some fish into various tanks. I got various small red shoulders, lemon jakes, OBs that I'm going to be able to move around, because I've already moved enough fish. This is an OB that I was stealing Popeye from. But anyways, I was moving fish already in preparation. So these tanks are all going to be able to be emptied, and the fish are going to be able to be moved to their according spot, or I should say, all the fish are going to be able to be moved to their certain spot anyways, because I wanted to keep all these tanks cycled before I sold this setup. So yeah, this is a crazy thing to think about. I never thought I'd sell this setup, but I'm really looking forward to moving on. So here we go.
So I know this is going to be a long video, but I really wanted to showcase each individual fish tank before tearing them down. I wanted to do this not only for your viewing purposes, but something for me as well to have on YouTube to remember by. I've really enjoyed putting this all together, setting it up just the way I wanted it, and to serve its purpose, which was to raise African cichlid fry. The different types of cichlids that I have raised are mbuna, haps, and peacocks. In these 9 tanks in their current state, there have been mostly OB peacocks and dragonbloods, some lemon jakes, and some red shoulders. I've had this tank set up for over 2 years now, and I had set up 2 40-gallon breeder tanks, one with haps and one with peacocks. In my experience though, I had a lot more success with the peacocks than the haps. When I had mbuna fry, it just happened naturally within my other tanks I had, and I just extracted the eggs from the female and put them into an egg tumbler. As far as getting fry for the haps, I only had success with mainly the sulfur head lithobates and some electric blue LE and insignis fry. But I was very precise on where each fish went when taking them out of these 9 tanks. I wanted to make sure I knew exactly what each fish was before going into these tanks, then keep it the same way leaving the tanks. I didn't like the idea of selling or auctioning the fish that I personally raise, labeling them as assorted peacocks or whatever the big box stores sell them as. What do you think so far? Do I make fish catching look easy? I promise you that it's never as easy as it looks. To be honest, I think I enjoy catching bigger fish than I do the smaller ones. The smaller fish always tend to find even the smallest spot to hide behind. I guess I could have probably removed the decorations before catching them all to make life a little easier, but like I said before, I really wanted to showcase the tanks for us all to see during this entire process. What was really entertaining when adding fish to the 20-gallon tanks is when they all shoot up like that, thinking they're gonna get fed, when actually they're just getting more tank mates to compete for food, which in turn creates a little more tank maintenance, of course. I actually had a lot of fun doing all of this. Even if fish catching can be a challenge, I was still very careful and very thorough on the different techniques to moving fish around in the fish room. Kind of like going up the sidewall, figuring different things out and what worked and what didn't. Very entertaining. Yep, see? I even got a twofer in this one. Doesn't happen too often. I'll take what I can get though. Slow and steady wins the race, right? At least that's what I think in my situation. But everything seems to be working out so far, moving from one tank to another. So I do have a couple of tanks that had some albino dragon bloods in them. So my new spot for these guys, and they were big enough to put them in with my dragon cage, as I like to call it, just so I can keep the dragon bloods with the dragon bloods. So that's where my next move is at this point. Got him. And if you haven't noticed already, on the top left corner of every tank is where I labeled what was in each individual tank. I was very precise on this, like I said. You know, sometimes you get lucky and you get a nice quick swipe. I'm not gonna lie, I was maybe a little nervous adding just a few fish into this tank with all the others, but for the most part, you saw a little bit of curiosity as you see here, but I promise you, after days and a couple weeks later, these guys have been doing just fine, and I haven't lost one yet. And no major aggression either. Just a little curiosity, that's all. I think there's enough fish in there to distract them anyways. As you can see in this tank, it's pretty overcrowded, so I'm going to have to find new homes for those fish eventually, relatively soon, but do not worry. I am actually in the process still of finding new homes for these fish and clearing up bigger tanks to move them into, so that way they have growth opportunities and better homes to be in.
Alright, so we got one guy left, an OB Peacock, and this guy was in quarantine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add him into my future 220 tank that's a 55 right now. And I'm going to add a few more fish into it so he's not being added into the tank all by himself. So that guy there I'm going to pick out. He's in my 60-gallon breeder tank. So he's going to go with me. Might try to find one or two more males, but right now it's kind of hard to tell with them being still small, other than the obvious. But then I got a few lemon jake, and it might be like a lemon jake OB mix, because the father was an OB and the female was a lemon jake. But I'm probably gonna pull a few of those out of here that are definite males, like that one for sure, and then that one. And if I can find maybe one more to put in with this OB from the 10-gallon. Which this right here is my future 220-gallon tank. So I'm going to be adding these few fish all at once, so that way one of them doesn't get picked on.
This guy was really nice. He pretty much for the most part just let me pick him up. That was very nice of him. Made things a lot easier for me.
This guy is really pretty. Got a nice
orange, purple spots, orangish red color. But last but not least, we are all empty on my 10 gallons.
This guy, I'll probably have to use the 2-net technique, because with the 10 gallons, it's a little bit more difficult to get 2 nets into a small tank, but for this one, I might have to do that.
There they all go, all scattered to hide. But I did end up getting them without moving any of the decorations.
Man, that guy's really neat. Definitely colored up for being a male with all those females in that one tank.
Alright, so these are the 4 that's going to go in the other tank that I know 100% sure are male. So hopefully these guys will be okay. I'm assuming they will. But I just didn't want to take the risk of maybe taking a 70% sure male and 30% female, because this tank has to be 100% male tank.
All the peacocks in this featured 220-gallon tank have been getting along very nicely with no aggression issues at all whatsoever. I wanted to make sure adding these 4 peacocks wasn't going to disrupt this tank, so I monitored this tank for quite some time before moving on to the next step in my 10-gallon rack process. But lo and behold, even to this day, everyone is happy and healthy and has had no issues, and everyone is getting along nicely. I think it does help too that they are still young and have plenty of room to grow up together. I'm really hoping that this is one of those fish tanks that I cannot wait to see in its final state. I feel that with all the different pops of color within the OBs, the solid orange colors of the dragon bloods, and the offset albinos even, is what really makes this tank stand out. This tank really means a lot to me because of what I started with and what I have done so far to make this happen. It's what really makes the African cichlid hobby that much more worth it to me. Now I am still planning to add some sulfur-head lithobates in the future, males of course, but I don't know which is male and female yet, and I won't know until they get older.
Alright, so every tank is empty now. So now comes the fun part of emptying the water, putting all my sponge filters in a bucket with some tank water, and then pack everything up. So here we go.
This was probably the more annoying part of the whole process, and the reason being is because I couldn't just move to the back of the stand and remove all the plugins for the lights that went with their respective tanks. I needed to reach in and trace the cord and plug back to the power strip and unplug it, all while maneuvering around the airlines as well, and on top of pulling out the tank hoods carefully without breaking anything. It was challenging at first to do, but the more I removed, the easier it got. Now what you see me doing here is I'm putting numbers on each individual tank. And the whole reason for me doing this is each one of these tanks are not all the exact same tank brand. And every 10-gallon tank is just ever so slightly different size from all the others. So this is why I put numbers on each individual tank. So that way I could correlate those numbers with the hoods that were on each individual tank. And I wanted to make sure that whenever I was giving these to Craig, that whenever he would put it back together at his place, that I numbered these hoods that went with each tank. So that way he didn't have any confusion as to which hood fit with which tank, that he knew exactly which one that they went with. There were a couple of hoods where the lights didn't work on them, so I wanted to make sure that Craig knew about that and labeled them accordingly. But I cleaned everything up really nice, made sure to test all the other hoods to make sure all those lights worked as their intended purpose, and I made sure that everything was nice and neat. And now I'm getting into the process of taking out all the sponges from the sponge filters. And yes, of course, I actually did clean up all the internals of the sponge filters, because I wanted to make sure that these filters and everything that was included with them looked almost brand new, as if you got them right out of the box. And I kept all the sponges in tank water and put a lid on them and sent them on their way. As you can see, all these sponge filter internal parts look like they had hardly even been used. I wanted to make sure Craig was happy. And then next, of course, was all the decorations to pull out of each individual tank. I know I probably could have done this when I was catching the fish, but to be honest, I really didn't have a whole lot of issues earlier like you had seen catching all the fish, so I was okay with doing it in this order. So this is all the different decorations and stuff that he was getting out of all this stuff, and I think it was totally worth it. I even went the extra mile and cleaned all the walls of the tanks and made sure everything looked really nice before pulling the water out of all the tanks. Now this part is actually the fun part for me. I mean, all of it's fun, really. I mean, it was very entertaining to do this whole entire project. But, I mean, it's just as simple as putting the pump in, pulling the water, and moving to the next tank. I had a pretty good system, and it worked. So, it was fun. Job well done.
All right. Most of the water is out of all 9 of these tanks. And I wanted to leave just a little bit of water, so that way at least I could have a little bit of beneficial bacteria within the substrate. I know it won't be a lot, but every little bit helps. So here's another final look before I start taking them down in preparation for Craig to be here, so that way everything's ready for him when he gets here. So here we go.
Now, even with 10-gallon tanks, I still wanted to be extra careful with taking them off this rack. And I actually took them outside on a skid and placed them there temporarily until Craig got to my house later. But it's still quite a process of taking each individual tank out of this stand, especially like even in the middle, you have to be careful sliding them out. And I had these sitting on camper weather stripping, so that kind of stuck a little bit to the tanks, but other than that, it wasn't too bad to pull each one of these tanks out. This was a lot of work for me to do on my own, but I knew that it was going to a good home, and I was happy with it, and that's why I had fun doing it.
Man, a lot of work. Whew. All right, now the stand.
So this is where you guys get to guess and see if I actually took this entire stand out of my fish room myself, up the stairs and out to the patio where the fish tanks were waiting for Craig. What do you think? Could I do it all myself? Looks promising, right? Well, I'm afraid to admit that it actually was not possible for me to do myself. We actually almost didn't get it out of the room because we had to take the door off the hinges to get this stand out of here.
So one thing that's kind of neat about this stand is I put 2 power strips on the back side of this stand. So that when I plugged it in my outlets, there was one outlet that I'll show you here in a second for lights, and another outlet when I used to have this whole set connected with heaters. And I had the lights plugged into this switched outlet. So whenever I turned my switch on and off for the basement lights, the tank lights would be separate from the house lights. So that's why whenever we set this up to switch, it would only come on for a certain switch to turn the tank lights on, as opposed to house lights, which are connected with this here, and with that does not stay switched. So that is why we have one that constantly is on for the heaters and another one I had on for the lights. So pretty neat.
Wow, so much more room for activities. So many activities.
All right, we're getting all packed up and ready to go. Heading to Craig's house. He just got here, got a bunch of stuff packed. And that's his truck there with my stand. We barely got it out.
All right, guys, so that's it. Some little fun facts about these tanks is the oldest 2 tanks that I used to have upstairs used to be me and my wife's tanks, so we put guppies in. That's how it all started before they got moved down here. And the 2 oldest ones ran for about 2 years and 7.5 months, give or take. And then I started slowly buying more tanks as it progressed from 2 all the way to 9. And then the rest of the tanks were about 2 years and 1.5 months or so. So a little bit of fun facts of how long I've had these tanks in operation. But anyways, I appreciate you guys watching, and we're gonna get moving on to the next step hopefully soon. But thanks for watching. You guys take care, and we'll see you in the next one. Price tag out.